When you're doing product market fit, you better be good at product. Otherwise, you fail. The way I frame it is different than pre-PMF and post-PMF. I frame it as, are you doing product discovery or are you just doing product optimization? Because that's what I think is really going on. If you're not doing real discovery during product market fit, good luck.
Welcome to the Seed Stage. I'm your host, Enzo, CEO at June. Every week, June and Point9 invite the most inspiring product and growth leaders to share their practical advice on how to grow your SaaS. Whether this is a story behind a feature, a marketing framework, or a risky update made on the pricing, we're digging ideas you and your team can put in place next week. No fuzz, no BS. Enjoy the show. Hi, Marty, and welcome to the Seed Stage. How are things?
Hi, Enzo. Thanks for inviting me.
It's so great to have you here. I'm really excited. I'm very humbled. I started in product 7 years ago. Now I'm building a product for other product people. And along that journey, your books helped me a lot to figure things out. But I also have a lot of questions for you. So I asked myself.
Looking forward to it.
So thanks so much for accepting the invite today.
Thank you.
So many people know your name and read some of your book, but maybe people are not familiar with your background. So let me share a few words. You began your career a decade in software development at HP. After that, you joined Netscape, where you participated in the birth of the internet industry, in a way. And there you worked directly with Mark Anderson. More recently, you were the Senior VP of Product and Design at eBay. Fast forward to now, you founded the SVPG group, Silicon Valley Product Group, to help others build successful products. And many people know you as a writer, a speaker, an advisor, and a coach. It is fair to say that your books are probably the most influential right now in the product world. I have a first question around product market fit for you. So I'm having a lot of very fruitful conversations on the difference between product management before and after product market fit and what works or doesn't. But I haven't seen much content from you about it. Do you see a significant difference between the two?
Well, that's a big question. I know where you're going. But the funny thing is, I think what you're really implying is when you're doing product market fit, you better be good at product. Otherwise, you fail. But after product market fit, it's a lot of other things, growth hacking and optimization and stuff like that. My view is there is a very big difference in many companies between product market fit and not, but not for the reason we're talking about. In most companies, product management is pretty worthless, whether it's pre-product market fit or post-product market fit. The issue, and in good companies, there really isn't much of a difference because it is good during product market fit and it continues to be good. In fact, in good companies, there really isn't so much of a line between before product market fit and after. Because what's the first thing you do when you achieve product market fit? You go after an adjacent market. And then you do new products. So you're always doing product market fit. The way I frame it is different than pre-PMF and post-PMF. I frame it as, are you doing product discovery or are you just doing product optimization? Because that's what I think is really going on. If you're not doing real discovery during product market fit, good luck, good luck. Now, you might not call it that, and you might not be doing it, so you run out of your seed money before you've got anything. That happens all the time, as you know. In my opinion, that's the single biggest reason for most failed startups, is because they are not using the skills of product discovery to come up with something good. But in a good product company, those same skills are applied every day. You don't have to look further than, Amazon does it at massive scale. Apple does it at massive scale. So, are they pre-PMF? Hell no. They're the opposite of that. But when you go inside a team, they act like a pre-PMF team. And that's, I think, what's really important is how are you even defining product management? How are you even defining the work that the team is doing? So I understand the lens. And I tell startups, look, if until you get product market fit, nothing else matters. I mean, get rid of all your other objectives, get rid of all your other stuff. The only thing that matters is product market fit, because you need them to focus on that. But good companies keep that focus on constantly making that product better for that market and doing well for adjacent markets.
That I totally understand. But in the day-to-day, do you think there are some kind of differences in the day-to-day for product people, whether the company is early stage or not? Or do you think like basically the skills and the task that the product people repeat are the same, when Amazon was early stage and where Amazon is at today?
I mean, there are definitely differences. I mean, we can talk all day about. There are lots of differences in the company. I've worked in all stages. My favorite by far is startup, early stage, just because that's kind of the pure form of what we're talking about. One of the differences is when you're a brand new startup, you're not just working out a great product. You're also working out a business strategy. You're also working out a go-to-market strategy. You're also working out, pricing, things like this. And once you have product market fit, you might change those things once in a while, but mostly you're able to sort of hold those constant. Like if we have a go-to-market, let's say we use a direct-to-consumer we don't want to have a sales force or we don't want to have a reseller channel. We have a direct-to-a-customer go-to-market. We're probably going to do that for our products until and unless we decide, now we want a new go-to-market. So there are certain things you don't have to spend time on every day. But pre-PMF, you got to figure that out. And in fact, I meet a lot of companies that they have a good product, but they don't have a good go-to-market. And so they have to pivot on their product to try to fit a go-to-market that can work for them.
And I think it does make sense. And you touched on something very interesting around the go-to-market. How much is it the responsibility of the product manager, or let's say the broader product person, to influence or try to help figure out the go-to-market? Is it like, because it's a thin line, right? You want to influence and help, but at the same time, things can be a bit siloed.
Well, this is probably a good example of a difference when it's seed stage versus a larger company. So, and also to be clear, I don't recommend that product managers even be hired during seed stage. To me, that's the co-founder. If one of the co-founders is not an experienced product person, I mean, all I could tell you is I'm not investing, and I'm probably not even helping. That is so critical that the product person be one of the co-founders. So as that product person, they are not only playing the product management role on that product, but they're the core of the product strategy. They are the product strategy, and product strategy, go-to-market is a huge part of that product strategy. That doesn't mean that they don't collab. Like they may hopefully do have a co-founder that says maybe has more sales experience or a different skill set, and that may be playing a big role as an input to this product strategy. It usually is. But no, I'd say this is squarely. Now we're talking seed stage, because at scale, it's a little different, right? Let's say like Apple has the go-to-market strategy is baked in, right? They do two big go-to-market, three really. They have retail stores, they have massive online commerce, and they also have reseller channels. So they have the go-to-market. So the product teams don't have to worry about that. They just have to make sure their products fit within that. So they do have to worry about it in that sense. If they release something that is not consistent with that channel, that would be a big problem. Mm-hmm. But for us, for early stage, it's very much part of the equation, because there's a lot of back and forth. What product market is this sort of dance between getting the product and the go-to-market to actually align. and we solve for both.
Yeah. So to recap, seed stage companies shouldn't hire a PM too early, except if really one of the founders doesn't have the skills, right? And then when that person joins, that person should be involved into figure things out, right? A bit beside.
Absolutely.
When is a good moment to recruit a first product person, a first PM, let's say?
Well, let's double click on that because I don't want to give people the wrong impression. So the hypothetical here is that you have a founding team that does not have an experienced product leader. Okay, first of all, this is a huge red flag for the company. And I just want to point that out because if this is the case, and sometimes it is, right? But if this is the case, hiring an individual contributor product manager is probably not going to help at any size, by the way, because you need somebody with the political clout and experience to essentially act like a co-founder. Right? An individual contributor product manager is not going to be treated like a co-founder. So I have been involved in these situations where the founding team is a great team, but they do not have this product skill. So their first hire needs to be not a product manager, but a real product leader, not because they need to manage a bunch of people, but because they need to have the experience doing exactly what we're talking about, which is like, okay, what is our go-to-market? What is our product strategy? What is our path here? What are we going to focus on first? Product strategy is literally, what are you going to work on? Doesn't get more important than that. That's the only thing a startup is really there to do. So this is really critical. Now, that's the case when the founders have no experience themselves. The more common case, and I get this question, this is a really common question, one of the founders does have product skills, good product skills. But at some point, they're too big for that founder to keep playing the product role on all the work going on. And so that's when the question becomes, when do we actually hire a product manager? Now, I usually encourage those founders to wait as long as they can, because that's a very difficult hire, first of all, because, that co-founder's got everything in her head and all the learning that's been going on is probably both the visionary and the strategic person, and then really understands the craft of where they've got to. And so they need to find somebody that can really work well with that person. They're not going to come in and say, I'm the visionary. See, that's a big difference from the scenario where you do bring in a visionary product leader. So you don't want a visionary in this case. You want somebody who can help make it happen. As a general heuristic, usually it's somewhere between 20 and 30 engineers. In other words, once there are more than about 30 engineers, a co-founder head of product, no matter how awesome they are, there's just not enough hours in the day to answer the questions that all the engineers have that need answers.
Or it would be,
so that's where the,
or it would be a mistake for the founder to spend the time on the product side only.
The founders are often conflicted. I do talk to a lot of founders that are struggling with that. They want to continue, but they also need to fundraise. And they're like, I'm literally not sleeping. I need help. I need to figure this out. And so a lot of times we talk about, well, what do you really want to be doing? And sometimes the right answer is for that founder to hire a COO that does all the other stuff so that they can go deeper for a lot longer on product. I mean, that's literally what Zuckerberg did at early Facebook. And I think that was the right decision for him.
Was it with Sheryl Sandberg? Yes.
Right.
And and that relationship actually between the founders and the first PM hire is a very interesting one also that I hear a lot about. And I wonder if you have like pieces of advice on how to make this relationship work, because it feels like a lot of PM leave the founders, they don't leave the company in the beginning.
Oh, always. Well, I mean, this is the general truth. People they don't leave a company, they leave their manager, right? So, but that's why I was saying before that first of all, you need to do it at the right time. In other words, don't do it too soon. If you do it too soon, you're going to have too many cooks in the kitchen, right? There's for your French. So too many cooks in the kitchen's not good. So you want to make sure the founder is really driving that product until it needs to scale. And now, hopefully you're post product market fit at this point, but maybe not. It depends on our product, obviously. So you're looking for somebody who can really complement you. Now, the next big thing I talk to the founders about is you have to decide what kind of product management you want. Because if you want to be the boss of everything, if you want to make all the decisions, then you don't want a real product manager. You want what we call, what we know as a project manager. And that's sometimes referred to as a feature team product manager. It's because you're looking for somebody who can just implement your orders. That's not really what product management is for, just like that's not what the founder did originally either. But if the person wants to run it that way, and look, this is the prerogative of the founders. They can set up whatever culture they want. So and I try to convince them and explain to them, if you do that, here's what's going to happen. And you're not going to be happy. Because most of them are not happy because that command and control model does not scale well. And their people, they get frustrated because their people they don't like working there. They don't take responsibility for what they're building. The most they take responsibility for is shipping features on time. That's the most they'll take responsibility for. That's a project management role. If, however, you're looking for people who can take ownership of a problem, and as a founder, you can count on that person driving that problem to resolution. So they ship something that not only works, but solves the problem. It might be churn rate, but whatever the problem is, they solve it. Okay, that's a product manager. And so you need to look for somebody that knows what that really means.
Is there some, this is like an ongoing debate, right? I wonder why project manager sounds like a bad word in the product world, whereas in many industries, including consulting, it's not a bad word, right? And do you have...
Well, I wouldn't say it's a bad word, but it is not the same job.
Right.
Project management and product management. In fact, you couldn't really be more opposite, because if you boil it down, project management is all about delivery. It's all about delivery. But product management is all about discovery. So you couldn't really find two more different jobs. And even if you don't, even if you hire a real product manager, you still have people that can do project management. It's usually part of the engineering team. So it's not that project management is a bad thing. It's that that's not product management.
Right. And have you seen counterexamples of that? Have you seen top-down companies where, people are not frustrated, they follow the vision, or the outcome is great, etc.?
Well, I have. I mean, you can't deny there are top-down companies that have made a lot of money. And sales-driven companies that make a lot of money. I've always wondered, I don't think I've ever met anybody in my 40-plus year career that liked products from Oracle. They don't like the products at all. But look at how valuable they are. They're an incredibly valuable company. Or SAP. Have you ever met anybody that likes SAP? But they're very sales-driven, very top-down. You can have a business. Now, I would argue today that there are much better startups and growth stage companies that have provided much better solutions than those companies, and that they're in the process of being disrupted. Mm-hmm. But they're also very well-established companies, and there is a chance for each of them that they will change their DNA and become more like we're talking about. So it's not that you can't do, but as far as getting people to do their most, I mean, my whole thing is helping people really do amazing products. It's very hard to get them to do amazing products if they're just being told what to do.
That's very interesting. It really feels like this is like the never-ending loop, of product, of trying to be bottom-up and accepting top-down and so on.
I don't even think top down, bottom up describes it well, because a lot of people interpret different things. And the truth is, in the best organizations, they do both. The leaders do their job, which is product strategy, for example, to identify the most important problems to solve. And the teams do their job, which is to solve those problems. Now, is that top down or is that bottom up? It's neither. It's the leaders doing their job and the teams doing their job. And in my view, the dilemma has always been that there are companies that understand this is how good companies work, and then there's those that don't. There's so many great quotes from Steve Jobs, of course, but one of my favorites was, look, we don't hire all these great engineers to tell them what to build. We hire them so they can show us what's possible. Now think about that compared to your top-down micromanaging,
vision of the world
founder fresh out of business school. So it's a completely different mindset.
100%. And to touch on Steve Jobs, it's interesting because I think it feels that the popular opinion is that he was very opinionated and like giving a lot of strong directions to this company, and is mostly pictured like that, right? But actually, if you read books of engineers that work for Apple, they would tell you quite the opposite.
Yeah, and he's people are portrayed all kinds of ways. There's no question he was opinionated. There's no question, but that's very different. In fact, people on his teams would tell me he was really good at telling them everything that was wrong with their prototype, but he didn't know how to fix it. He would say, like, figure it out. This is not good enough. Figure it out. And so there's a very big difference from a strongly opinionated leader saying, we need something that does this, it's so important, versus somebody that says, I want you to build this, I want you to build this, and you build this, and then it's all going to be fine. That's a very different mindset. And I think he was very good at inspiring his people to pursue something. He also had pretty amazing product sense of what was just now possible. And he was not always right. There were several failures there where he was too optimistic about what would be just now possible. The Newton was probably a great example. It was just not ready for that. But the iPhone was like a spectacular example of just barely possible, but amazing. So the vision was right. The timing was beautiful. But, it took him 3.5 years of product discovery to do the first iPhone. So there's a lot of prototypes. In fact, of all the companies I've ever been in, they do more prototypes than anybody I've ever seen.
I'd love to touch on that. I'd love to zoom in into the capacity of Steve Jobs, or just in general, to understand, what the people wanted. There is this thing you wrote extensively about on really understanding the customers and what they want. And you also, you warn people of not hiding behind data, and quote unquote, you said, what's not good is that too many product teams get so focused on data that they stop spending time talking to their customers. How does one learn to listen to customers? How did you learn?
Well, the most important thing, and I hope, because I've said this even longer than either of those things, which is, yes, you need to talk to your customers almost every day. However, we're not asking them what to build. So listening to customers, you don't take that literally. In fact, there was another great Steve Jobs quote, which was, you could conduct 100 focus groups, you will never get an iPhone. He's just making this point that the way you come up with a great product is that you have to understand your customers. But then it's on you, the product team, to come up with a solution, as Jeff Bezos likes to say. Our customers can't tell us what to build. The executives can't tell you what to build. Your job is to invent great solutions on your customers' behalf. So when we say talk to customers, we don't mean listen to customers. What we really mean is test on customers. And when we say test on customers, what does that really boil down to? Two big things. One is we've got a prototype. Can they do what they need to do with that prototype? Just, can they do their job? If it's business, do their job. Can they solve their problem? Can they get the entertainment they're looking for? Whatever it is. And then the most important question after that is, would they? In other words, would they choose you? You've been doing startups for a while. You know what boiled down all this noise about product. The hard thing about product is making a solution that's so good that people will switch to you. And that's what's hard. And it's not even, that's why the feature parity strategy doesn't work, because if you just match features, most people will not switch to you. Ben Horowitz likes to argue it's got to be on the order of 10 times better than what's already out there. That's what's hard. And that's the second question is like, okay, would you actually pay for this? Would you actually switch to this? That's what we're looking for. And the reason we need to get in front of customers, and don't get me wrong, in addition to the data will tell us if it's working, but it won't tell us why it's not. So good teams, especially, you're focused on seed stage, early startups. This is what I really drill into them. You need to learn quickly. And just learning that your current thing is not good enough is not enough. You need to learn why not. So the combination of data and testing our ideas face-to-face with real users, that's our fastest path. When I say face-to-face, we can do this quite good virtually now. But yes, that's why I try to get product teams, especially if they're pre-product market fit, to do this every single week.
Thanks for sharing. Super, super, super inspiring. And I love the framework in 2 steps. I think it's very, very powerful. The thing, though, that I still don't understand is how do you bridge the gap between listening to the people but not listening to what they want you to build, figuring out something which is underneath, right? And then the bridge to the solution and putting that into their hands. Like, how do you understand deep people motivation, deep people drivers, deep people problems if you can't really listen to what they tell you for the solution?
Yeah, and you realize, of course, what's really going on is what people say and what they do are often very different. So the first thing we tell people when they test their products is don't ask them for their opinions. They're not experts on this. Don't even ask them. You don't need to ask them. The next thing we tell them is when we use data, we are looking for patterns and ideally statistically significant results. Sometimes we just have to resort to just evidence, but that's what we're doing with data. But that's not what we're doing when we sit down face to face with users and customers. We are not looking for, say, 10 people in a row to say thumbs up, or I'll buy it, because we know that's meaningless. The reason we go talk to users is for the opposite. We're trying to find the reasons they wouldn't buy it. Mm. So what we're trying to understand is those like, well, why? What is still wrong with this product? We won't rest until the data shows that we've solved it. So the data is what tells us we've solved it. But we talk to users to get inspiration about what's still not right. And that's why when we talk face-to-face, test face-to-face, we are looking for the negative. We're trying to find all the things that are wrong. We're not trying to hear how much they like it. We don't care what they say. We're not there for that. We are there to try to find out why not. And one of my favorite user researchers likes to frame this as you never get the answer from any one person. But every time you do these negative tests where you're looking for what's wrong, it's like another piece of the puzzle. And eventually you've seen enough of the puzzle filled in that you really understand what to do. And by the way, what a beautiful example. I said earlier how I feel very strongly at a pre-product market fit company, startup, that the co-founder needs to be the product person. This is why. Because if the idea is to see all the pieces of the puzzle, who gets to see more pieces of the puzzle than the co-founder? Mm. So if that co-founder hires 3 product managers and they're each doing their own little piece, they're only getting a little window into the puzzle. The co-founder is seeing the whole puzzle. This is super important. And then they can say, all right, we now have enough. We can see what we're doing wrong. We're going to need to change this. And then, of course, hopefully the data shows that, yes, now it's working.
That is such a good way to think about it. So to go back to the example of Steve Jobs and the iPhone, do you think Jobs basically drove, I mean, it's going to be impossible to reply to that, but maybe he drove some exploration with like the BlackBerry and people were complaining about the buttons. And he was like, there should be a better approach than buttons. Like, did he have a negative for that?
Well, obviously, and I met him a couple times, but I never obviously had any conversations like this. But interestingly enough, I worked with early Skype. And Skype hired some people from the iPhone team and also from other teams, from Motorola, from Nokia. And I had one of the most amazing dinners in my career because the iPhone had just come out. And I actually had, I got one of the first ones, and it was in London at this dinner with it. And the Skype team had hired people from Apple, a couple key people from Apple had worked on that, as well as others from these other companies. And we're at dinner and we're talking, and we're mostly all admiring the iPhone, literally admiring it. It's like, because it was amazing when it first came out, and people stopped me on the street to see it, kind of thing. Nobody can remember now. It's been so long, but it was amazing. And what came out during this dinner was something really fascinating, which is during the time that literally Apple was designing the iPhone, literally, which Steve Jobs had a vision that 100% touchscreen device could work. No proof. It took years of work, but they did. But literally, while they were figuring out the first iPhone, at Motorola and at Nokia, they were conducting focus groups because that's what they did. And you know how focus groups work? This is really basically marketing-driven product. That's how it works. At a focus group, they say, okay, what we want you to do, they recruit a bunch of target audience, and the people buying smartphones back then were business people. And so they said, come and bring your current smartphone with you. If you remember at the time, the BlackBerry wasn't really the hot thing. There was a new device that came out right after the BlackBerry called the Trio from Palm.
Of course.
The Palm Trio. And a Palm Trio, actually, I had one. I loved it. But the Palm Trio was almost exactly a BlackBerry. It had a keyboard on the bottom half and a screen on the top. But unlike the BlackBerry, it had a little touch screen.
Yeah, and a pen, right? And a pen.
And a what?
No pen on this
pen.
one. Okay.
No pen. This was just the same basic form factor as a BlackBerry. It was a little thicker, but same form factor. But what was amazing was it had a touchscreen, but if you ever used it, it was a terrible touchscreen. You could barely even dial a phone number with it. So you would just use the keyboard. And anyway, in totally different parts of the world, Nokia and Motorola are conducting focus groups. This is what the marketing people do with a focus group. They say, okay, we're working on a new smartphone. What we'd like to know is, what do you want in that new smartphone so that we can make it amazing? Do you know what happened in both places? They said they love the keyboard. They hate the touchscreen. Both places. So what do you think the directions were out of marketing? No touchscreen.
Yeah.
Of course, Apple would never ask, right? Apple's like, why would we ask? These people don't know. All they've ever seen was this crappy touchscreen on a Palm Trio. They have no idea what's technically possible. That's our job. And so you don't even ask. And I think I remember we realized that this is exactly what was going on. And we said, okay, in a nutshell, that's the difference between a good product company and not very good product company.
And you that's a great example. And you touch on something else very interesting, which is that also the feedback you get depends, of course, on the people, whether it was the business people or like the mass market audience, but also the feedback is conditioned by what you've built. So if you've built a crappy touch screen, people will tell you, I don't want that, right? Whereas, and this is another question I had for you. There seems to be some...
But we should just get closure on that point. The real point, that's what's wrong with a focus group, is in a focus group, we're asking people what they want. In a product testing, we don't do that.
You just observe.
You just, can they use this or not? If they think the touchscreen's crappy, that doesn't mean you get rid of the touchscreen. It probably means you make it better.
Yeah, 100%. And there seems to be a resurgence of company trying to build great features, great quality software from the get-go. So in B2B, there is one called Linear. I'm sure you heard about them. B2C, we love Amy. It's a calendar app mostly. And it seems like, instead of like going small in iterating on these partially half-assed features and collect whatever feedback they could, they're moving like toward another direction, which is trying to reconcile small scope and great product quality. I wonder what you think of this kind of movement. Is it a new way kind of to deliver and think about product and iteration and collecting feedback? Or is it just, the same old thing, but with a new DNA?
No, it's a good example. I mean, what you're really pointing out is that most companies have no clue what MVP is supposed to be. That's what you're really pointing out. When you have companies that build those half-assed products, and then they're like, "Yeah, we'll just iterate from there." They have no idea what they're doing. Of course, who's going to want a crappy product like that? So they are misunderstanding what MVPs are even for. The idea is, so I would argue they've got the right understanding. MVP was never intended to build a crappy product. And honestly, it's one of those things, it shouldn't have been minimum viable product. If you redefine it as minimum viable prototype, you get much better, because what we do is you have a vision for the product you want to deliver that will provide the real value. That product has lots of risks. There's a lot of risks, unknowns. The point of an MVP is supposed to be to test each of those risks so that when we build the product, it's not a half-assed product. Unfortunately, so many people don't understand that. And I don't have to do it as much anymore, but 10 years ago, after the book, The Lean Startup, came out from Eric Ries, so many people didn't understand. And the book, unfortunately, is not clear on this. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it could have been explained so much better. It doesn't take that long to explain to a founder what it really is, but there's a lot of founders that never get that explanation. So they do exactly what you're describing. They build a half-assed product, and then they're like, that whole lean startup doesn't work because people just hated our product. And you know what they do then? They don't iterate and make it better. They just pivot. And so they give up too early. So, what we're really getting into, all the reasons startups screw up. And in my opinion, it's mostly because they have not learned how to do this well.
Yeah. I'm going very deep right now in the Lean Startup. I'm actually writing an article exactly about that. So I'll share it with you, and I'm sure I'll be excited to quote what you just said.
It's good. It's not. There's still a lot of people that don't understand that, and it's just really a shame. But if you just tell people, realize there are prototypes that we do in discovery, and the point is to build an amazing product. What you ship is products. Prototypes are what we test with.
Right. Is it also that one of my findings is that the world has evolved a lot since the book was written, and so you could build less to de-risk, your market or your hypothesis more than a decade ago. Do you think some structural changes happen that made the Lean Startup, the way it was written, not as relevant, or not as relevant, but like to be considered a bit differently, let's say?
Honestly, this was equally true 10 years ago. So I don't think that changed. Now, I actually think there are changes coming due to generative AI. But for the most part, no. And why is Figma worth maybe around $20 billion? Because they make it really easy to do this stuff. And Figma isn't even I would argue they're the best, but they're certainly not the first to work like that. And so we've had good tools, which you could call low-code tools, but it's really tools for designers to rapidly create these prototypes. We have had tools for those for 2 decades. 2 decades. I mean, that's 20 years. So we have had these things. They existed. It's just that I think the Lean Startup, it actually did a very good job explaining a lot of very important concepts to people. But this is one that I really think he could have done better.
Could you touch a little bit on how Figma won, why you think Figma won, and also you touch...
it's the same reason, most products win. It's because they just did a much better job solving a very real problem. They just did a beautiful job solving. Now, you could argue it's because they're really good at product. and that wasn't their first rodeo. So this is, they just do it. And don't get me wrong, I think there's future products probably underway right now that are going to leapfrog even that. Because Figma was done probably just before the real impacts of generative AI. So if you combine a sort of like a Figma mindset with latest technology, you probably get even a lot more. So this part has never been better. But I think the real point is these tools have been around for a long time. They just, the knowledge to use them has not been around for a long time. The other thing that's changed is, Figma's riding the wave of design, but a lot of startups don't even understand why they need design. So they end up not even helping themselves because they don't even know that this is really a core competency. It's funny how often I'll meet a startup team and they've got 10 developers, they're good, and a founder. And I'm like, wait, no designer for this? And they don't even understand why that might be needed. So I have to explain, you're probably wasting roughly half of your engineers because you are not having a designer to make sure what they build is going to be worth building. So that's another common anti-pattern. There's a lot of them.
You should write also about design and product designers. I don't feel there is enough content.
I've written a lot about it, and because I always talk, whenever I talk product, I tell people product managers don't create products. Product teams are what creates product. And, to me, you do not have a startup. You just don't have one unless you've got somebody to play the product role that really knows the customers, the data, the viability of the business, somebody to play the design role, and somebody to play the engineering role. Without those 3 people, you just don't have anything.
100%. You mentioned AI a few times. What is it changing in the product development era? I
mean, I have a habit of being overly optimistic that things will change faster than they really do. So I'm already, thought certain things would change already. And of course, as we all know, it's a hard problem, Gen AI, and there's still a lot of stuff that is not done very well right now. All you have to do is read the newspaper to see that. So, but that said, there's a lot of evidence that at some point, the things that we can predict are going to happen. And then there's probably a whole level of things that we can't predict yet. They're second order effects. But usually when I talk to teams, I talk about, well, let's first separate. There's Gen AI to help our product be a better product. And then there's Gen AI to help us build products. So those are 2 different discussions. They're both happening simultaneously too. But my world is more about how does it impact how we build products. And look, the most obvious already is impacting how we build the developers. I'm a former developer, and I spent a lot of my career doing tools for developers. This is probably a golden era for tools for developers. The stuff being done for developers is just beautiful. And I am very excited about the longer term implications of that. That's sort of very wonky as terms of in the product world, but there's some big potential to improve team topologies. And so anyway, there's a lot that's driven by that. We just talked about design. It's already starting to impact design. So, because what we really want with design are the high-level product designers that understand the entire experience. And we really, if we can avoid it, we'd rather not hire a bunch of low-level designers to do a lot of the visual design and design system. And again, that's already starting to happen. The hardest one to really talk about is the impact on the product role itself, on product management and on product strategy. There's clearly opportunity there, but there's also, I mean, I'll tell you the truth. I've recently reversed my advice. So the truth is, we're all figuring this out at the same time, trying to figure this out. I used to say, when ChatGPT first sort of came out and we could see what it did, I started saying, look, before you do anything, before you do any kind of strategy, any kind of spec, and any kind of narrative, use that to get started. And now I've stopped saying that because people have been doing that and making really bad decisions because they're trusting too much in what they're getting. They're not understanding how a large language model really works. And so they're taking it for more than it's worth. So recently I started saying, well, this is just ridiculous. I can't believe people are not thinking, they read this and then they think it's right. And it's like, are you serious? You know this is not right. You have to use your brain to interpret this. And unfortunately, human beings do everything possible to avoid thinking. That's the reality. So now I've reversed my advice. I say, first, think about it. Do the primary research yourself. Use Google. Just get some data, get an opinion, and then use ChatGPT to try to challenge your thinking, to try to see if maybe there's a better option or maybe there's a hole in your argument. So that is that's my latest back and forth, as mostly as a reaction to people taking results too literally, too happily, too eagerly.
And it's funny because it's exactly what I heard yesterday evening at a dinner. Someone was doing a master thesis. GPT gave him a paper, and he looked for the paper for like 2 hours online. He couldn't find it. And then he asked GPT to give him the paper. And GPT was, oh, sorry, my mistake. This paper doesn't exist. And so maybe as more people lean toward the same...
Because they don't understand how it's working, right? It's not there to give you that paper. It's there to give you what it thinks that paper might be.
So, but as more people lean toward the same conclusion as you and that friend, is it possible that actually AI... penetration among the product, skills and responsibilities is less strong than we assume, just because people start to be careful with using it?
I mean, this is why I say it's taking longer already than maybe some of optimistic people like me thought it would. But honestly, it's also very new. Any technology needs time to really work through a lot of these things, to effectively get smarter, to get more reliable, to also become more clear about when something is a fact and when it's just something that looks like a fact. These things, we all need time. You'd have to be 30 years old, have done this for 30 years to remember, but I do remember when Google started. Literally when they started.
1999, right?
Search engines started.
1999, right?
Search engines started. And it was, people had made the same mistakes with Google, in the early search engines. They trusted the early results more than they should have. Because now, of course, pretty much every kid knows the dynamics of basically how search engines work and search results. And look, Google has gotten so good at giving you good results in the first few. You have to filter through the ads, but you do that, you get some good results. that has not happened yet. The equivalent maturity has not happened yet. So both the technology needs to get better, and as users, we need to get more sophisticated about what to expect and how to interpret those results. So it's still very early. But that said, I'm still very optimistic. It's just, the product role in particular is probably the one that's going to have the most work in a post-ChatGPT world, Gen AI world, because viability and value, that's where the challenges really are.
Very interesting. So from 5 years from today, what would you say would be one thing that has changed for the PM role to take on that responsibility, like you mentioned?
Well, I'll tell you what I hope and then what will probably happen. They're not the same. Because we're really fighting human nature here. Because people, like I say, they avoid thinking. So it's really hard to get people to think. And for product people, this is the core essential, that they're willing to dig in and think. But, the truth is 5 years from now, you won't need to think.
If you don't want.
That's right. And so what we'll probably have, the good news is that we'll probably avoid a lot of the worst products. The bad news is probably we'll have a whole lot more mediocre products. On the other hand, when this is what I hope happen, I think if you have somebody that really does have the skills and is willing to think, they will have more powerful tools than they have ever had. And it will help us do better products than we've ever built. But that's my optimistic future. And then you could also see my worried future.
So to lean toward this future, I want to close that conversation with your book. You have an upcoming book, 12th of March. It's going to be a big announcement. It's called Transformed. Yes, awesome.
That's it right there.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw it on your shelf also behind you.
I just got yesterday the author copies. So yes,
amazing. So same design as I can tell, right? You kept something systematic. So that's your third book, right?
It is. It's the fourth book, though, in the series. We had planned a 4-book series. I have a marketing partner that did a book on product marketing called Love.
Martina. She came on the podcast, actually.
Oh, good.
I think I have the book right here.
There it is. I have it there, too. You can sort of see it.
She's amazing. I recommend people listening to the episode with Martina. She's she makes product marketing the clearest thing on this planet. Really. So going back to your book, it's called Transform. Your first book was called Inspired. Let me know if I'm wrong, but it was mostly about best practices for top product teams. And then you wrote Empowered, where you share the best practices for the product leaders to actually help the teams have the great environment. And now you're writing Empowered, and I quote you said, it's the bridge to gap. It's a bridge between where the companies are right now and where they need to be. So kind of the bridge between the two books. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, all three of the other books, Inspired, Empowered, and Loved, are really about the techniques for the product practitioners. Like you said, product teams, product leaders, and product marketing. The most common question we've got, though, all over the world, but boy, especially in Europe, the most common question we get is, yes, this is how we want to work. Most people would say this, they understand this is how good companies work. The problem, they say, is that in our company today, it's impossible. Our leaders don't think this way. Our shareholders don't think this way. It's so different. And many people would say, we just don't understand how we could possibly change to work this way, even if we want to, even though we want to. And so they would ask us, how do you change? And I don't know how many people know this, but I have 5 partners, and this is what we do. Is for 20 years, we help companies that do want to change. So we have a lot of experience, but it's only a few people, right? But we have a lot of experience working with companies do this. So then we thought, well, what we need is another book But unlike the books that talk about the practices, this needs to be a book on how you change, really how you change. And we also realized a few things. In our other books, we intentionally use examples from the best Silicon Valley companies. We're trying to share how they work. So that's the point. In this book, it's too easy if you're a Silicon Valley company because you were probably born in that model. It is much harder if you're, say, a UK, London-based company or, Berlin-based company or Sydney-based company, and you've never worked this way before. And that's harder because now you've got an entrenched company used to the certain way of thinking and working. How do you change them? So all the examples we picked, there's a dozen examples in there. They're all companies that were old, established companies that were not in the industry that wanted to change and had to change. So we told the story of how they changed. And then to me, the most fun part is we wanted to show people what companies that have changed were able to do that they could never do before. Because that's really why you do this, right? Is so that you can innovate like an Amazon or you can innovate like a Spotify. And that's really the point of the book, is to show you why you should do it and how you should do it.
Very nice.
And so the first half of the book tries to summarize what it really means to work this way for everybody from a CEO on down. And then the second half of the book talks about the techniques to change.
Very nice. Can you give us a sneak peek on one example of how to change, maybe?
Oh, it's one of my favorite. I mean, we picked examples from all kinds of industry, from healthcare, from travel. One of the ones that was one of the most inspiring to me personally was the backstory is before the pandemic, I gave a talk in Dubai. It's my only time I was in Dubai. And there was a team that traveled, a leadership team from a travel agency based in Saudi Arabia that traveled to Dubai, which is not far, but traveled there and to see this session. And I met the leaders, head of product and head of technology. I met them and I loved them. They were just super eager, very smart. And they're like, is there any reason we can't do this? I'm like, no, do it. And they went back to Saudi Arabia and they transformed their company. I introduced them to one of my partners, Christian Idiotti, and we introduced them to a product coach. And this old school brick and mortar travel agency that was being disrupted by the internet, this old school company completely changed. And then what was really impressive was they were tested because when the pandemic hit, travel shut down. Saudi Arabia's borders closed. And it totally disrupted their business. And in addition, created the need for another kind of travel, sort of, which is talked about in the book. I won't take the time here. But this team had learned the skills to, in just months, do an entirely new product market fit for a completely different market. And not only succeeded, but today they have over 80% of the market share is them instead of Expedia, the big US OTAs, the big travel companies that dominate in the whole world, not there. And so this is a team in an area that is definitely not known as a tech hub, right? Saudi Arabia, that has done beautiful work, as good as anybody in the world, and helped both their company and their country. And so I love that story. The company's called Almost Safer, and it's a travel company. And you can read the story. There's a dozen stories like that about how that happened.
Beautiful. And in that case, what was the driver? Because you talk about the change, but what was the driver of that change? Was it
Well, the driver was easy. They were probably going to go bankrupt if they didn't embrace technology because of the big global travel companies were taking over. Because, would you want to just have a brick and mortar travel agency business? It's not much of a business today. So they realized that they had to, what most companies call go digital. They realized they needed to get serious about technology. And the challenge was this was very new to them. The best thing they did, though, was they hired a couple leaders that were very motivated, very open-minded, and very quick learners.
Very nice. It's always about the people, right? Everything is always.
It always is. Always.
I have one last question for you, Marty. Thank you so much for your time. When I read Inspired, I just felt in love with it, like many people. I also felt a bit overwhelmed and realized it was a bit too early in my career, I think, to read it. When is a good moment to read each of Marty Cagan books? And when is a good moment to read Transform?
I mean, yes, I have heard from people, which of course I love hearing, that people have told me they've read Inspired at different times in their career, multiple times, and they get different things out of it. Because, right, if you're at a startup working on, product market fit, then certain techniques, if you don't do them well, I argue you're in trouble. And yet in other company, in other stages of your career, if you need different techniques. So people see different things at different times. The biggest thing I would say is you need to decide, everybody needs to decide for themselves, what kind of product person do they want to be? Do they want to work on, an empowered product team, or do they want to be on a feature team? Because if you want to be on a feature team, the books from us are not really for you. and a lot of people read it and say, well, we're never going to do this. So you should read it if that's what you want. If you want to learn to work like the best, that's what those are for. If that's not your goal, there are plenty of other books and plenty of other services. So you should know what you're looking for. But to answer your question, if you find yourself on a product team that is being asked to be a real, what Silicon Valley call a regular first-class product team, then I would encourage you and each member of your team to read Inspired. I would also recommend, there's another book by Teresa Torres called Continuous Discovery Habits. It's a very good book, and I think a very good complement to Inspired. Very hands-on for those of you that are just doing discovery. If you find yourself as a product leader, especially as a new product leader and you've never done it before, I hope you read Empowered. And I hope you read it like twice because that's what you need to do to learn quickly how to do your job, because you as a product leader are really key to the whole thing working. And then finally, if you are either an individual contributor or a product leader and you realize you're in a company where, I literally got an email this morning. I get them all the time. I haven't responded yet, but this person says, I just joined this company 6 months ago. It's in the healthcare industry. I know what we need to do, but the company doesn't want to do anything. And his question is, where do I start? And he says, by the way, and I don't want to get fired by making everybody mad at me. So this is pretty common. And I haven't answered him yet, but I will be saying, look, that is literally what we wrote the book Transformed for. So if you're one of those people trying to figure out how you can effect change, that's what Transformed is for.
Beautiful, much needed. We're at the end. Thank you so much for coming, Marty. To stay connected or to dive deeper in today's conversation, when can our listeners find you?
SVPG, SiliconValleyProductGroup.com. We publish online all our stuff for free all the time. We have a newsletter. We have articles. Help yourself. You can find out about what we're up to. You can read about the different partners. And they're all amazing because they've all built and led product at great companies around the world. So I'd encourage you to get to know the different product partners. And if you get a chance to meet one of them, you should.
They're all great. I have to just approve here. I will include the link to svpg.com. Thank you so much, Marty, again. Have a good one.
Thank you, Enzo. Hope this was useful.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Seed Stage. The best way to support us is by leaving a 5-star review. The team is pushing hard to bring you the best stories and insights, and your feedback helps others discover our podcast too. So please, if you haven't done it, take a moment to leave us a review. This means a lot. Until the next episode, take care.